Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I'm David Pendergrass. In today's podcast, I'm doing something new. I'm starting to take questions live from real humans. Usually all my questions are from real humans, but they're via email or on Twitter. But now I'm getting a few people here and there who would like to ask their question live, and so we can have a conversation. And up today is Amy. Amy's going to ask a question about a Buddhist friend. Well, hello, Amy. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, A Glimpse of the Kingdom.
Well, I have a friend that she was raised Buddhist. I don't believe that she is practicing Buddhism any longer, but she doesn't really espouse to any religion. And so I've gotten in some discussions with her about Christianity, and she seems open to talking about it and learning more about it. And so the other day I was kind of suggesting, maybe she read something, and I was going to, try to recommend something or let her know that I would find out a book for her to read. And she said, well, I'll just read this book I have at home on world religions, and I'll check that out. So I'm not sure that's going to be the best resource for her to look at. I don't know if it'll do Christianity much justice, but so I guess I'm wondering if you know of a resource or a book or something I can offer to her.
Yes, I do. And not to be cheesy, but yeah, the Gospels. I really encourage a lot of people who, when they start talking about religion, want to talk about the religion. They want to figure out like the main tenets of religion, what are the major things they believe, things they do. And I'm not against that inherently, but particularly for my religion, and Christianity certainly is a religion, I want to take them as quickly as possible to Jesus. And it's easier for us to get, not you, but humans, to get bogged down in these other things. I especially find this to be true when people think they know things about Christianity. Well, what about, Catholics think and this and that? And I always want to do my best to get them back to Jesus and let Jesus speak for himself. So one challenge / encouragement you could give her and right away, and look, hey, this is free online, or I can give you my own Bible or something. Would you read even just one gospel? If she says, oh yeah, okay, I guess so. But then I would just, and it depends on the level of conversation she's willing to have. If you only got a few minutes, or even a few minutes of interest, I would just unpack very quickly. A gospel is a life of Jesus. It records his sayings and things he did. Not everything he said, and not everything he did, but a lot of things that he said and did. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they're all quite similar. John's a little different, but I encourage you to read one. And if she says, well, which one should I read? You can say, read any of them. The one that's probably a little bit easier to read for a Gentile mind is John. So if you had to pick one, maybe I'd say, I tell you what, start with John. And then the second thing I do, after I do just a little, that's what a gospel is, it's a life of Jesus. Secondly, I'd say is, you don't have to understand it all right now. You don't have to get it all, and that's okay. I'm here to help. I will help do whatever I can to make sure it makes sense to you. And I don't have all the answers either, and that's okay, but I know where to get them. So when you do read it, I would love to hear what you think about it. And listen, friend, there's no pressure. I'm not a salesperson. I'm just genuinely curious what you think about it when you read it. When you read John's Gospel, I would love to hear your impression afterwards. I would love to see what you think. So those are the two things that I do. I try to make sure they read a gospel and focus on Jesus, and two, and I explain a little bit of that, but two, to say, I want to start a conversation. You don't have to know it all. Come on back to me if you want it, and that's it. At minimum. So having said that, what do you think her interest level is? Do you think she just has like a cognitive passing interest in religions in general? Or do you think she's more of an open mind to learning more, really learning more about Christianity?
I'm getting the sense that she is open-minded. The other day when I was in the discussion with her, I was kind of talking to her about, just how firm I am in my faith and how I am, confident of the truth that I believe in and things like that. And she got tears in her eyes and actually was kind of acting like she regretted that she didn't raise her children in a church or in a religion. And so I think that, over the course of time, she has gotten to the point where she is open to reading or looking into a religion.
Well, that sounds wonderful. It sounds like the Spirit's already working on her. And certainly she has some emotional, I don't know whether baggage, but some kind of emotional import to be crying about that. And wishing your children grew up in something implies she feels guilt because of that. Maybe that's a good thing to address with her if ever comes up again. You mentioned before you wanted to raise your children in a church. How are you dealing with that, or why is that? So that way you're coming at it from a genuine friendship level, and you're a good listener. And if she gets sad again, you process those feelings with her, which is different from going right at the religion, quote unquote, religion aspect. So if I were doing it, I would go at that route first to make sure she sees you as someone who really does care about her. Now, hopefully she sees you as a person who cares because you do actually do care. I'm not saying you're duping her and then you pull her in for the jugular. I'm just saying that you actually are a friend to her, because almost everyone I've ever heard and met who's converted to become a disciple of Jesus, they do it, and there's nothing novel about this, they do it because they felt loved. I remember years ago I read a book, and my brother-in-law had to read it for his school several years ago. And it's just a book full of conversions. I think it's 12 chapters. I think it was 12 different conversion stories of a guy traveled around the country interviewing people from Buddhism to Christianity, atheism to Christianity, a Wiccan, being a witch to Christianity, those kind of things, a Hindu. And it was 10 or 12 stories. Let's say it's an even 10. Of the 10 stories, I bet at least 7 said the thing that made him do it was the love of a Christian. Like one time the Hindu family had a child who was real sick, and the Hindu people basically, it was like karma, get over it. But the Christian neighbors, the literal neighbors down the street, kept bringing them dinners. They said, why are they doing this for us? And they said, we love you, and we're Christians, we love you. It's little things like that. And so, of course, that meets the New Testament model. That's the best thing there is. The second thing I'd say is about that is not only does that work, secondly, if they're not careful, and this is especially true for thinker type kind of people, that we can get bombarded with details and information and not ever really want to make a commitment. And it's like a red herring. It's just something to talk about and debate about and say, well, isn't that interesting? But that's it. Now, you might want to have those discussions. I know people who love to debate just to look at they love to debate. I don't. Quite frankly, I don't. In fact, that's why chapter 1 of my book is, are you really open-minded? And I say in my book, I don't want to waste my time. But Amy, you don't have to feel that way, but I do. I feel like if we're just doing information, well, yeah, go read a book on world religions. But if you're interested really, then let's talk turkey. But I'm going to show it in love, first. So, well, I'm glad to hear that she's open-minded, even a little bit.
Me too.
That's good.
Yeah.
And you might want to help her steer away from, maybe not immediately, but over time, away from, I want my kids to believe in a religion. And you might want to ask her, there's a guy named Greg Koukl. He's out of California. It's STR.org, stands to reason. And I learned this from him, and it's just a simple but brilliant technique. When someone says anything at all, any kind of declarative statement, and you really be a good listener, you ask things like this: what do you mean by that? Or I might say, can you tell me more? Or what do you mean by that exact expression? So if someone says, I want them to be raised in religion, a simple question is, what do you mean by raised in religion? What does that mean? Can you explain more to me? It demonstrates you're open-minded, it demonstrates you're loving and having conversation, but you're also listening very carefully to the information they say. And if they say, well, religion, be good moral people, and you might go, oh, what is that? So do you think that the only way to be moral in a religion, is that what I hear you saying? And you're genuinely asking, you're not, some people like to do this with a snot. Oh, so what you're telling me is, it's not snotty. You're genuinely, trying to learn more. But when you do learn more after 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions like that, then it's okay to start having your opinion. For example, if she says at some level, well, religion, because it's good for them to grow up and get morals. I might say something like this after I ask a lot of questions, but I might come back at some point and say, early on you were talking about getting a religion because it helps them learn morals and so forth, or gives them hope. And that's an interesting way to think about it. Personally, I want to believe in something because it's true. So the reason why I'm a Christian is not because it gives me hope. It's not because it gives me good morals. A lot of systems in the world gives you morals. I'm a Christian because Christianity is true. And I like to believe in things that are true. And that's why I'm a Christian. So, and then you kind of leave it at that. and see what, watch her facial expression or see what she says. Or you might even say, what do you think about that? And the reason why is you're gently trying to goad her to think about the facts, not her subjective feeling about it. So at some level, we want her to start asking the question, did the resurrection happen? Was Jesus real? Those kind of things, because now we're getting close to New Testament gospel.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, you've given me some really good tips on, just how to converse with her. So yeah, I will definitely take this with me, and the next time we talk, work toward, making sure she feels loved. And
it reminds me, and to encourage you and the listeners too, that I say this very often when I've taught lessons through the years on evangelism. It seems to me that there's no Bible verse for this, but I think it's a very good assessment of the evidence that people, they're on a spectrum of belief. So maybe it's like A to Z, and let's say A means they're absolute phenomenal atheist, and Z means they're full-on disciple of Jesus. Most people, in my experience, feel the pressure to get them from whatever letter they're at to Z in that conversation. That means if they're at letter B as in boy, they got a lot of work to do, and I got to get them to the cross right away. Now, some people do that, and that's okay. Those people are called evangelists. And if the Spirit moves you in such a way, if you really feel it's time to say, I need to share the gospel, I want you to believe it right now, do it. So I'm not against sharing the gospel, my goodness. What I am saying is that people are at different parts of the journey. The average Muslim, studies demonstrate, takes 4 years to reach a conversion state. It's also true of, I talked to a missionary, I was in Moscow, Russia a few years ago, and he said the same thing about Russians. He said that we've done the research, it takes about 4 years for one Russian to come to the faith. My point is that takes a long time, and it's okay wherever God uses you in the interaction. I'm convinced God uses Christians all the time to move them back a letter, sometimes back a lot of letters, which is horrible, or sometimes up. And God might use you in her life to get her from letter A to C, or from F to whatever, to Y. But maybe not. Maybe you go on all the way into Z, and that's wonderful. But I'm just trying to encourage you to not be too discouraged if she wants to read the gospel, she reads it, and she goes, I'm fine, and she never talks about the rest of your life. Well, that doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you failed. You've only failed if you haven't demonstrated love, and you have not given her legitimate things to consider, and of course, if you haven't prayed for her.
Okay, yeah. I actually listen to Greg Koukl quite a bit, and I believe that he talks about, just planting seeds, and...
yeah, he likes to say, put a pebble in your shoe. Yeah, my goal is to put a pebble in your shoe. Now, of course, I would nuance with Greg, and I think he would concur with me, but if not, that's fine, because I'm right and he's wrong. That's just a joke. I think we'd concur is that's his goal. His goal is to put a pebble in the shoe. That doesn't mean it's every single Christian's goal is to make them think about something. Some Christians really should, and some argue that all Christians should, share the gospel every second and let the Spirit do its work. And I'm saying that is a legitimate possibility. In my own view, I don't think that's very compelling that every Christian at all times should do that. In fact, I think that can be counterproductive. I think there's a timing issue. And I'm not going to do it right now, but we could go through several places in the New Testament where not everyone is like the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts, where Philip's went alongside him and said, hey, what you reading there? I'm reading Isaiah. Do you understand what you're reading? How can I understand unless someone helps you? I'm here, I can help you. Not everyone's at that level. Sometimes they're Athenian people at the Areopagus, and Paul's saying, I see you're very religious people. And they think he's a joke. So, it just depends on the person and where they're at. I think the Spirit can use the people to put a pebble or sometimes get them all the way to the cross, and we just have to have sensitivity. But we do, I think, should be hopeful and expect that he might want to get us to Jesus right then and there. There's a sense of expectation that's exciting.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yes, I completely agree.
Thank you so much. That's great. That's great. Well, I'll pray for your Buddhist friend and for you and your interaction with her. Keep up the good work.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate your help.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want more, go to davidpendergrass.com, davidpendergrass.com. If you look at the top, you'll see various tabs that have sermons I've preached, a link to all the podcasts I've done so far, a link to my consulting website. For more information about my consulting, see davidpendergrassconsulting.com. Also, you'll see information about the books I've written that are found on amazon.com. So davidpendergrass.com, one-stop shop, all that you need. If you want to reach out to me, follow me on Twitter at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass, and send me a message. I'll see you online.